I don't want to start out with bad news, but there is a big issue floating in the air. I would say for most of us, and it has to do with the unemployment rates that are apparently starting to skyrocket here in Mexico. There was a very interesting very interesting figures that were provided on the CNN Expansión, their website. Very interesting data. Basically, according to them, or some experts that they've been consulting with, 35% of those employees who have superior, advanced studies here in Mexico, 35% of them are unemployed. In contrast, only 8.6% of the population which did not even finish primary are unemployed. So there's something here very interesting and very concerning in terms of not only the unemployment rate, which they're talking about, it may be reached, we may be seeing numbers that are quite unheard of, or at least have not happened in Mexico for a long time. And then if you add that we're starting to see major percentages of unemployment in the educated population. Boy, that would make, that makes anybody nervous. To talk about this, I have on the line, she's been on the show numerous times, so it's always great to welcome her back, is Veronica Vaz. She's the General Director of CIDAC, which is a think tank here in Mexico City. Let's talk about unemployment. How scary is it, Veronica? Welcome to the show. Tell me, how bad is unemployment in Mexico?
Well, it's pretty bad. Last week we had data from December in 2008, and it's the worst number of unemployment since in the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, can I ask you a question about the unemployment rates and what numbers we're using? There's always been a question mark about the numbers that are being used and what does this reflect. I remember there was a big debate as to whether, someone who's selling gum on the streets or on the corners, do you consider that person employed? Or is it, is there a different classification for that person? They're, subempleados or underemployed. When we talk about employment rates, are we talking about formal employment?
We're talking about formal employment, and there are also other technicisms that have to do with the person has to be searching for a job, mm-hmm. and the person has to have had, the persons that are employed are persons that are working more than 6 hours a day.
Uh-huh. So if you're working less than 6 hours a day, and if you're working in the informal sector, you wouldn't count in these rates?
No, you wouldn't count, and the informal sector is not considered here. But we can say that if we have more unemployment on the formal sector, the possibilities that this is going to be reflected in the informal sector are also true. Mm-hmm. But it's just that there's no formal data about the informal sector.
Well, if you can't get a job in the formal employment, your only option is to try to do something in the informal arena, correct?
Yes, and if we have more unemployed in the formal sector, we're going to have more competition in the informal sector.
Now, how bad is it getting? You've just given us an initial bit of data in which, it's been the worst unemployment rate since the last 8 years, which kind of reflects what happened in the year 2000 when there was a pretty serious economic crisis. In part, it was already coming, but also it has to do with, does it have to do with what's going on with the terrorist attacks, or is that completely separate?
I think it's completely separate. I think what we're seeing right now is it's a global crisis. The unemployment rates have gone up in many countries, not just in Mexico. So what we're seeing here is just something that's happening at a global level, and it does have to do with the crisis, and nobody knows how deep the crisis is and how long it's going to take us to come out of the crisis. Mm-hmm. In the terrorist attacks, it was I think it was like a more concrete problem. Right now, specialists really don't know how bad this is going to get. But the expectations of growth for Mexico in 2009 are zero.
Mm-hmm.
So
or -1.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if we have unemployment, if we had bad unemployment in December, we're expecting worse numbers for 2009.
I was very surprised, Veronica, about these figures which underline there is a much higher unemployment rate among workers who have formal education or higher education than those who don't. That is a very, very difficult, I would say, challenge that the Mexican government is facing when you're starting to have so many highly educated professionals unemployed, and you know, how do you create the jobs that this country needs to produce in order to satisfy the needs of all the new professionals who are graduating from the universities? You know, when I look at these rates, you know, these unemployment rates among professionals, you almost want to tell them, you know what, you know, think about getting a formal education, because you may be, there's more likelihood of being unemployed.
Yes, but something that is also true is that many of the big companies that are established in Mexico today cannot find the right people for some of the job offers they want to make.
How could that be? I mean, you would think that the market itself would push people to figure out what kind of requirements they need to fulfill in order to get these jobs. Or at least the universities would make sure that these kids, when they graduate, at least they have the skills that these companies are looking for.
There are a lot more people today in Mexico with university degrees. This is a phenomenon that goes in all Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is that there are not as many engineers, for example, in Mexico. You have a lot of people going to law school and going into some other professions, but people that know how to be an engineer and to do very specific work and technical work are lacking, and also a lot of people that study science, for example.
Mm-hmm. That was Veronica Vaz, General Director for SIDAC think tank here in Mexico City.